Hello again, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today for the Business After Windows live Q&A sessions. And again, to remember, during these sessions, you can submit your questions on Twitter by tweeting @BizAfterWindows with the hashtag #TheNewCloud. Up next, we'll be talking to Merrill Rick Chapman, who spoke to us about platforms of the future. Rick is SoftLetter's managing editor and publisher, and the author of SaaS Entrepreneur, the definitive guide to succeeding in your cloud application business. He's consulted in the industry for a wide variety of software and high technology firms such as IBM, Novell, Microsoft, Sun, and many others. And he's also helped us put on this conference, so he's been pretty fantastic, and I'm very glad to have him here today. So thanks, Rick, for being here.
My pleasure.
And we're going to go ahead and jump right into the questions. First one, Rick, as a software developer, I work on customer API integration projects and find that the older, larger companies are behind, while young and small companies have built their APIs early on. Can the big companies catch up, or are they simply being outpaced?
Big companies can never catch up to smaller, more nimble companies. They can throw more resources, which paradoxically tends to slow things up. One of the things that I'd like to emphasize is that in software as a service, APIs are becoming an obstacle to change, not a method of change, not a bridge to change. And that's because there's too many APIs out there. SaaS companies right now, 65% of them, and this is from our latest research on software as a service. We've been doing this big survey since 2006. It was the first survey that started to dig into this issue of the SaaS model at all different levels. And a few years ago we added a question: do you have an API for your SaaS system? And it was like, well, 15%, 25%, 35%. Now it's up to 65%. Well, that means that, you know, every SaaS company is pushing out an API. That means that you've all got to figure out how to integrate with all those different APIs, and it's becoming a wilderness, a blizzard of APIs. And of course, each API is different, and it's documented differently, and it's updated at different times and in different ways. This is why I believe that APIs are not the way to integration in the future. What I think is going to be the way to integration in the future is, you know, some of the concepts we've discussed, such as the transparent cloud, where instead of APIs, you're going to see increasing numbers of what I would call service layers being created. These service layers will allow you to plug in your application into this common framework, and in other words, centralize API development into a common framework in which you plug in your information, your data, and don't have to involve in massive customization and integration across, in some cases, hundreds of applications.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So you discussed the security settings for all of the devices that one owns. Do you suppose that people's lack of understanding for these devices may be propagated by the companies that sell them in order to create demand for other apps that can be used to instill security and peace of mind upon the users?
You know, that's a great question. In the 80s, when I was working for a software company called Micropro, they were the publishers of WordStar, there was a strong suspicion that a lot of the new viruses that were being released, and this was the dawn of the age of security penetration and compromise, were being created in places like Russia and China so that it would drive more consumption of security software. And it may have worked. There's always been a question about whether that in truth was taking place, because some of the best security companies were based in Russia. Kaspersky is one that comes to mind, and a lot of the most nasty viruses come from places like Russia and associated environs. So there was always a suspicion that there was sort of a unvirtuous circle taking place here. But I don't believe that device companies want their devices to be branded as unsecure or dangerous. I don't think Apple was really happy when nude pictures of Jennifer Warren showed up across the internet. That's really not what they're trying to do. I really think that the problem with devices is that there are so many of them, more are on the way, and the attempt to manage and control them is just well, I'll learn about my desktop, and maybe I'll figure out my tablet, and okay, do I have to really do the phone? And isn't that a phone? And now you want me to have a smartwatch? I have to protect my watch, and now you want to stick some smart bandage on top of me to monitor my type 2 diabetes, and I have to figure out how to secure that. And so no, I think the reason that's what's happening is that there are just too many darn devices, and people are just want to live their lives and don't want to spend time agonizing over each gizmo that's being introduced into our world and figure out how to make it secure. That is going to be centralized. That is just inevitable, because you cannot ask a human being to figure out how to do a phone, a smartwatch, a tablet, a laptop, a hybrid, a desktop, and on, and figure out how to secure them all. I mean, no one does that. I'm very technically astute. I know how to secure a desktop, but even I well, I got to figure out this Android tablet. Well, gosh, that's kind of a pain. And there's this iPhone I own, and I don't really have a clue how to secure an iPhone. I just don't do certain things with it because it scares the hell out of me. So, I just wrote an article about Apple Pay and Swipe and Wave and biometric Touch ID, and it's like, well, that sounds all great, but how do I know that's really all safe? And I don't think anyone out there really knows if it's all safe. So no, one of the reasons I think that this is going to eventually be centralized in some type of virtual workspace or environment is you just can't expect people to run around and figure out how to secure increasing numbers of gizmos that are being flooded into the market. It's not practical.
Mm-hmm. So you spoke on Apple Pay, and it's still pretty new, but in what you've been seeing and hearing, kind of what's the reaction of people out there? Are they afraid of it, or are people just kind of giving it a shot?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Geezers like me, terrified. Kids, no, they're going to accept it, but they're not going to accept it if you have major security breaches, which and again, they're not going to accept it if they don't feel that they have some type of control over it. I mean, the way that Apple Pay works is interesting. It's biometrically guarded as well as using encryption. To use Apple Pay, you have to have your thumb or your finger on their reader. And when you wave the thing in front of the reader, it's also transmitting, it's using your fingerprint to protect the transaction, which people do get that. No one really wants to think about what happens if someone chops off someone else's finger and uses it to get onto the system, but let's not go there. That's kind of like, it's kind of grim. But people are concerned about, well, I don't quite understand how this all works, and what's worse is there's no one place I can go to sort of manage any of this. It's just spread out across a big schmear of software, devices. So I would say that the younger generation, millennials and Generation Z, the group that's coming up after the millennials, will be much more accepting. I'll accept Apple Pay because I'm technically astute, and I have to say that before I get involved in any system that's so different, I'm going to look into it. The reality is that it's much more, in theory, it should be much more secure. Let's face it, the old system where you basically hand your credit card to people with your signature on it, your numbers, everything else, they may get to know you, that's pretty easy to steal. But there's so much uncertainty as this blizzard of devices and operating systems and interfaces tumble into the market, that I would say that people over 35 are going to have a lot of resistance until they are confident. Something happens to give them confidence that they're managing this process. And I believe that's, again, getting back to the idea of the portable workspace and the transparent cloud. So SIA likes to call it the new cloud. So that's what I see happening. And I am looking forward to my first Apple Pay transaction, though I won't be able to do it with a 5S. I'll have to do a 6 phone because to use Apple Pay, you've got to have the latest phone. And here I have another device, which I've got to figure out how to use, and it's like, oh, thank you very much. Okay, moving right along.
You'll have to let us know how it goes.
You can use Apple Pay if you've got a Apple smartwatch, which is another thing I'm going to have to figure out how to secure, because if that thing is somehow involved in managing my credit card transactions, I'd like to know that that little timekeeper is very secure and that I can have some control over that. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a clue right now. So that's another thing I have to worry about. Let's not even talk about Google Glass. It's, that's just even more depressing. Okay, so go on.
Okay. Something that's been discussed quite a bit lately is net neutrality. Do you feel that net neutrality will impact businesses as bandwidth demand increases?
Net neutrality is basically a statement by politicians that everyone should pay the same thing for the same service, that everyone should be able to get high-speed service and pay a flat price. That's how it seems to come down to me. I think that over time a marketplace must be allowed to work. If I want to have super high-speed connectivity, I probably have to pay for that. If I want run-of-the-mill slow connectivity or normal connectivity, and that's all I want to pay for, that's what I should be allowed to do. What we're talking about is the speed of the pipes. I want to have a high-volume pipe that pumps out bits very fast, so everything's wonderful, and but I don't want to pay for it. It does cost to put in faster and faster digital pipes, and I don't think a system where, well, the government, if it wishes to subsidize and tax us to provide a level playing field, can do that. There is no such thing as a free lunch. I think if we're going to deal with net neutrality, let's be honest about it and say, do we think that the social benefits of giving everyone access to high-speed internet and fat pipes is a social good that transcends the reality is that some of us will have to subsidize another group of us to achieve that, that level playing field, because there's nothing free. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And if you want to have net neutrality, that means we're going to pay to subsidize that group of people that don't want or can't afford it. So that's a decision we have to make at a political and social level.
Great. Thank you so much. Is the term cloud here to stay, or will it go the way of web-based and SaaS?
I have to tell you, I hate the term cloud. I regard it as a giant marketing ploy that was incredibly successful. The problem with the term cloud is it has zero meaning. And you can test this out very quickly. Just go up to someone who runs a business and say, are you a cloud-based business? Or no, let's turn it around. Walk up to someone who doesn't know what you do and say, I'm a cloud company. And then you look at them and say, now, do you have a clue as to what it is I do? And they're going to go, no. Now, go up to someone and say, I'm an internet company. Are they going to have a clue as to what you do? And the answer is going to be no. The reason that software as a service has some value, by the way, I don't defend that acronym. It was ugly. It was, it's kind of silly. It's been abused. Up your sass. Get sassy. The puns and the wordplay is endless with SaaS. The reason that the term arose in the first place is that the application service providers of the 1999-2001 timeframe fell into such disrepute that the industry was looking for a new buzzword, a new acronym to replace ASP, which had been so discredited. So they came up with SaaS. And why SaaS won? They threw out a lot of stuff to see what would stick. SaaS stuck. But when you say software as a service, that at least gives you a clue as to what you're talking about. When you say you're a cloud company, I have no idea what you do. Are you a hosting company? Cloud could be hosting. Are you an application provider of some sort? I do things in my browser to run my business? Could be. Are you some kind of development platform? That's called platform as a service? Maybe. But when you say cloud, it has no meaning. So what you can do is this. You can say, I'm a cloud applications company. Oh, applications. Got it. I'm a cloud hosting company. Oh, hosting. Got it. I'm a cloud development company. Oh, development. Yeah, got it. So cloud is just a synonym for internet. It sounds hot, it sounds cool, so it was adopted. And the press has to talk about something. So internet was kind of like from 1994 or so. It was when the internet entered, the collective consciousness of the American population. They were bored with it. Everyone was bored with internet. So let's call it cloud. It sounds kind of like cool. Now, one of the interesting things about the term cloud is I used it during the 1990s. It normally served as a symbol that you would use in network design programs, where, well, when you wanted to represent, that whole bunch of connections out there that you weren't necessarily directly connected to as a local business, you'd say, well, I got a cloud. You just throw a connector, little cloud, and it would show your network plugging into the cloud, which meant I don't have a clue what's going on out there, but everything's being shuttled to where it needs to go. That's the first time I became, familiar with the term cloud. Sometime in 2009, you can argue about the origin of that phrase appearing as a synonym for internet. It was reintroduced. It struck everyone as cool, and it took off. But by itself, it has no meaning whatsoever, except as a synonym for internet.
Great, thank you.
And I hate it. I have to change everything from internet to cloud. I've got to take all the stuff I've written. I've got to say, search, find, and replace. Internet, cloud, done. Oh, God. But anyway, that's the way the world is.
All right. So mobile security seems to be lacking, and I feel we are in for a huge wave of social identity theft. What solutions are available to protect us from this threat?
There's all kinds of solutions. There's probably the best one. I mean, there's encryption. Apple Pay is a good example. It captures, your credit card information. It encrypts it and stores it in what they call the secure element, a specialized chip, which is probably pretty difficult to decrypt. There's biometrics. Biometrics has been, hot for a while. If you want to understand where biometrics takes us, I suggest everyone go out and take a look at a movie called Gattaca, which was filmed during the 1990s. Uma Thurman, Ethan Hawke's. It was a stunning look into the future, where everyone is biometrically measured down to the last DNA strand in your body. So there are ways to do that, but all of these systems can be beaten. All of them can be tricked. Now, I remember I've been involved in that industry. I remember once going to an industry in which they said, "Well, here's a way that you can't beat biometrics," and that is, there's a scene in a movie called with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. Was it called Damnation Man or something, in which Stallone gets frozen and he gets resurrected in the future, and everything's protected with biometric devices. So of course, retinal scans. So of course the bad guy figures out, well, if I need to do a retinal scan of the guy who's guarding the prison, who's controlling the prison, I need his eyeball. We don't have to think much beyond that about what happens in the next scene. And I once talked about this with a biometric guy, and he said, well, that wouldn't work because we have systems that can tell if the eyeball is alive or not so alive, because we can look at traces of the blood, the capillaries in your eye, and see if they're changing and pulsating as blood flows through your eye. So then I thought about that, and I said, well, what happens if you come back with a film of an eye that's alive and pulsing? And he goes, good point. We'll have to think that one through. So all of these systems can always, technology engenders technology engenders technology. And you're always going down the rabbit hole, and one system can battle against another system and always figure out how to overcome it. This gets me back to one of the ways you can help do this is put security in the hands of someone who understands what they need to secure, and come up with different variables and ways to secure it, as opposed to depending on some sort of technology that's just going to do it for you. There's no such thing. any technological barrier can eventually be overcome. If it's standardized, if it's uniform, someone will beat it. The best way, I think, is to, if you're going to protect security, provide good ramparts and safeguards, but also put it back in the hands of people who can constantly mix it up and change it. You can always solve a uniform technology. I don't think that you can solve the individual actions of billions of people making their own decisions about what they want to do to protect themselves.
Well, your eyeball example is a really good segue into the next question. How do you think the medical industry will shape up for the future?
Well, the modern medicine, we're entering on an epoch. Unfortunately, I'm not going to live long enough to see it. Maybe my daughter will. I think my grandchildren might, certainly will. But first of all, we're learning how we're already 3D organ printing, using 3D printing to do organs. Livers are the first they're working with, because it's a fairly easy organ to 3D print. Very undifferentiated cells in many respects, not a difficult thing to deal with. Implantable technology is becoming is what's going to come after the Internet of Things. Again, in SaaS Entrepreneur, I just added a little note about a guy by the name of Neil Harbison. He's a Brit, and he is colorblind. He's severely colorblind. He can't see color. All he sees is gray. And that's a problem, especially because he's an artist. So what he has done is he has created what he called the iBorg. And the iBorg is a device that he stuck on his head, and it's stuck, drilled into his skull. And he sees color by means of vibration. When his iBorg spots a blue versus red versus a green, it transmits a different vibration to his head. And he's begun to develop an emotional understanding of color through vibration. So we're entering in a stage in which man and machine are going to meld in ways that we aren't, used to thinking about. Diabetes, of course, a great example. I empathize with this because I have type 2 diabetes. I'm a fat guy. I don't drink a lot. I don't use sugar, but the genetic gene came up for me, and bang. So one day it's like, oh, take these pills for the rest of your life. That's pretty okay, but for someone who has type 1 diabetes, that's a tough issue to deal with. And eventually diabetes, breaks down your cells. It does all kinds of hidden damage that one day catches up with you. So, the idea of being able to monitor, control, precisely measure, and eventually supply insulin in a very precise fashion is very important to a lot of people. People who suffer from retinitis pigmentosa, where they lose their eyes, they go blind, coming up with systems that are implantable, that'll now restore sight to some level to people. Contraceptive preception is becoming interesting too. There are new systems that are under development that allow you to implant a chip that releases, a contraceptive chemical into the body of a woman that prevents pregnancy at a very high level, much higher than anything we have. So, world of medicine is going to change rapidly over the next 2 or 3 decades. One of the things that we're going to see, of course, is issues about privacy, because when we're filled with these devices, when we're using them, and they're just increasing in frequency and efficiency and capability, they're always pumping data about us across the cloud. Okay, we won't say the internet, we'll say the cloud. And the issues of privacy become incredibly complex in a world like this. And again, when you've got all of these gizmos screwed into you, wearing them, using them, how do you manage all this? It's going to become a fascinating exercise in privacy protection.
Great. We've got time for one more question here. What do I want to give you? How about this one? How would you debate the need for a transparent cloud within industries that have heavy compliance mandates and costs are extremely high? For example, medical, legal, or financial.
Well, I don't think you have a choice. I mean, you can't do APIs for every gizmo that's going to come out, for every smart bandage that's going to be developed, for every diabetes monitor that's going to be stuck into you, for every. In some cases, they're talking about putting cameras into your backside on a semi-permanent basis if they feel that you are at high risk for colonal rectal cancer. And one of the best ways you can prevent it is, well, if I see some polyps start to develop, do something about it, as opposed to waiting every 2 to 3 years. And in the meantime, if a cancer cell begins to develop in you and replicate, the faster you can deal with it, the better. By the time most cancers are detected, hundreds of millions or even billions of cells have come into existence. So you're going to have medical devices which are going to be looking at us on a 24/7 basis, and scanning us and saying, well, something's going wrong here. We need to act. This is the world of the future, and it's not a science fiction world anymore. It's coming into view. It can be done, and of course the cost of devices are constantly dropping as volume scales. So there is no choice on this. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to create a system which can manage and monitor, which can allow you to monitor and manage what is going to be talked about you, what is going to be known about you. The world of the future is going to be a very interesting place when you can watch your body go off scale, go off filter in real time, and be able to make a decision about what do I want to do. So this is the world that we're going to be seeing is that I'm talking about is maybe 50 to 75 years away, not much more than that. So the idea of the transparent cloud and plugging in devices into common frameworks that are manageable and understandable by a human being is a social necessity. We're not going to, as a free society, at least in terms of the United States and its concept of being free, we're not going to accept a world in which all decisions, all knowledge about ourselves is handed off to unknowable, unaccountable third parties.
Okay. Great. So that's all the time we have. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. To catch the final session, return to businessafterwindows.com, scroll down to the Q&A session schedule, and click the live Q&A button. Thanks again, Rick.
My pleasure.